Hello all my friends. Today I'd like to show you how you can make very easy for yourself a nice beach dress, evening dress, summer dress without any pattern. I will tell you later on exactly what the measurements are for the pieces that you will need for this particular dress. So in forehand I explained to you the seams on this dress I did not put exactly on the side. I put them slightly forward, so I have these nice long slits that just start on my lower hip here. I also chosen a material which is slightly see-through. As I said, I like to wear it probably on the beach, on my next holiday, on a real hot summer day. But if you don't like that, you can wear a short white leggings under it as an example, or you make yourself a little lining skirt in the height just to go to where your slits are starting. So I continue explaining you what I did here. I did it all in the waist and on this upper part with the smock shearing technique. I used a lot of material because I want it to be really loose on me in everywhere. On this topper part I have this little hem standing over 2.5 centimeters, and when I went along with my elastic shearing thread just underneath the arm, I dropped much lower, so this will not always stick against my arm or the arm would push it down. That wouldn't be nice. But you will see that when I show you on the sewing machine when I'm stitching it. The same in the back. I put the same amount of material into the back of this dress because I want it to be really the material to show and to be very, very loose for a hot summer day or a summer night. And if you make it totally a little bit see-through, because you can see I've chosen a slight different material on the top here, which is not quite as see-through as my skirt. For a real sexy outfit for a night time, you could make it, of course, the same thing, totally see-through, which would also be very nice. So maybe you wore this one night and you say, oh, it looks funny if I wear the same thing again tonight. So with some tiny little accessoires, you can just change this. You can take some brooch as an example, which you put in the front end and make a total different look, fitting with your bra maybe. In Germany we say it's a kind of dirndl look. And if you have a brooch and have a fitting belt to go with it, that would be really nice. I don't have one in that particular color now, but I got a white one, which I made myself a while ago, from stretchy material, and I just stitched some pearls on the front. So just to give you an idea that you can change this dress in different looks as you go along and as you wish. So that's about all what I can say at the moment to you. And now I show you how you can do this particular dress yourself.
If you like to make a dress like this, all you need is to cut 4 right angle pieces. The 2 pieces for the top, the front and the back piece are exactly alike. I made them 1 meter long, or wide if you like to say, and 42 centimeters high. Included in those 42 centimeters is already a 6 centimeter turnover for the top where the shearing will happen. If you like to have them slightly smaller, not quite so wide, you of course have to work out how much width you like to have in it. I've got very, very much width in it. So for the skirt you need 2 different parts. If you want to have the slit slightly forward, you cut 1 right angle piece for the back, which is 1 meter wide and 1 meter 5 long. But this is my long for my size, how tall I am. This you have to check how long you want the skirt. Maybe you only want to make a short one anyway. Then for the front piece, you need a 60 centimeter part, and you need it also make it, of course, the same length of 1 meter 5. All 4 parts I took to the overlock machine and went once all the way around them to clean them off, unless you have already maybe on one side the finished edge from the material. If it's nice and flat like this one, you can just leave it and use it like that without going over with the overlock. So we're going to start now by preparing the skirt. First of all, I marked on the front piece how long I want to close the seam for the slit underneath to be opened up. You best do this on all parts so you know exactly where you want to, how far you want to stitch them down together. I marked this with a little contrast thread because I didn't want to put a cut in with my scissors to mark it or to use a pen. I just put this little thread in, which I can easily pull out in the moment I finished my seam right there. Now I'm putting the right side of the material in the inside between those 2 pieces. Put edge on edge, and first of all just close that little seam that is all the way to where the opening starts for the slit. I added 1 centimeter, or I am allowed 1 centimeter, which is in all the measurements I had in any way. So put nicely both edges onto each other to have a very even seam, because my material is a little bit see-through. If the seam is not so even then in the inside, that wouldn't look very nice. And here I'm getting to my thread, which I pull out already, and you have to do a back and forth sewing so this will not open up again. Exactly the same we have to do on the other side, of course. It doesn't matter if you start on the top where your waist is, or if you start where you got your marks, where the start of your slit will be. That is up to you. And here make sure not to stitch over the marks you put in, because sometimes it's difficult to pull them out. Again, 1 centimeter all the way up to the waist. If you're not so firm with stitching 1 centimeter by your eye measurement, then put yourself some guide on. I got these magnets, which are very nice. You can always adjust them and change them over. So you just put it to the width you want to do a seam and let the material run along to it. Now I have to make some marks for the middle and my sides, which I've done here already before. As you can see, I folded my rectangle back skirt part and the front skirt part and added a color thread into it. And then I had to do exactly the same on the sides, which means now you have marked 4 parts from side to side and from the middle front to the back middle, because that is necessary now for one of the next jobs when we add the top part onto it. But now first of all we continue again with the skirt, and we turn over the edges of the long slit that we have in the dress. As you know, I got a 1 centimeter seam on the top. That means here for my little seam that I'm rolling or turning over, I do about 5 millimeters twice over. 5 and another 5. That means it's going to be a very tidy and clean edge. You do that all the way to the opening from the slit and the other way down again. If it is easier for you, then first go with your skirt to the ironing board. This seam here, I'm lying left and right separated already. You can iron those apart first, and as well iron this turnover that I'm doing here by hand. You can do it, iron 5 millimeters and another 5 millimeters over, and then it's really quickly done how you can just stitch along this edge. Then it goes much faster. And you can take your time. You don't need to rush like I'm trying to do. But here I'm already at the end. Fold this over again, 5 by 5, and finish all the way to the end. And now I got to do exactly on the other slit that I have. And you see, this will come out really nice with a nice even seam. So the other side is done. And now I just have to first of all do my bottom, the seam on the bottom. You can also leave this to the very end in case if you don't know yet which kind of shoes you like to wear with it. But I measured it exactly out for me, and I know this is my finished length that I want for my dress. So I turn over 1.5 centimeters and another 2. Also this, again, you can iron for yourself first, but I do it with my tape, my measurement here, 1.5, and then I put this on there and I see exactly that's 2 centimeters. And what's very nice here, I can see, because I've got stripes in my material, that they're always lying in one position, that they're not being pulled. Then you know you're not going to have a funny leftover at the end. Always look at this, or put yourself some pins in, and then you also can see how you're ending out at the end. Because you should not have anything sticking over. It should be exactly even, all 3 materials that are lying together there. In the moment you got the cutting done for this dress, it's actually quite fast to be done. I always feel that the preparation for anything like this takes much, much longer than the actual sewing. That's really the smallest part. First you have to think, which material do I want? How am I going to cut it? What am I going to cut? And so on. And that's much more time than the actual sewing. So we're doing the complete seam. We keep on watching that we're even and finish it all the way to the end. So my skirt is practically finished. I put it away on the side and I start to work on the top. Here you can see I ironed my 6 centimeters over, which is for the top. As I told you, was added into our 42 centimeters height in the cutting already. As well here I cleaned with my overlock all the sides off. And now you put the right side on the right side. It's got to lie in the inside. You do not fold these ironed part over. You leave it flat. You cannot stitch it in. Right on right. Clean it off a bit. I always like to work tidy. I don't like having threads hanging all over, all the way around. And again, we do 1 centimeter seam, as that's all I want to do here. I close both sides of the top part now with this 1 centimeter. Exactly what I allowed. You might want to allow more or do a different seam, a left-right seam or anything. That's all up to you. But I'm doing it this way. And in the moment I got both seams closed, you could either go to your ironing board and iron the seam apart, or you can stitch them over on both sides, which I will do right now here. You have to have the proper side lying on the top, the left side downwards. You apart this seam apart. You can see it a little bit through on my material, that you have each one laying on the side, and I stitch it down by 1 millimeter. This is very nice, especially on this seersucker material that I have here for the top. After a wash, sometimes I like to roll up a little bit the seams, which I don't like. And if you stitch this down on each side by 1 millimeter, this is very nice after a wash for ironing, or maybe you don't even need to iron it, it just lies flat anyway. So that's what I like to do sometimes on seams. And we do exactly the same on the other side. And you can see this is really a nice finished off then when you do this. You can do that on many, many seams. Take your time while doing this, because you will know the more exact and tidy you work, the more fun you will have and joy you will have with whatever you're stitching, sewing for yourself or for somebody else. As you know, there's always people that say, oh, you made this yourself, therefore they have a much closer look at this than if you would have bought this dress. And therefore, let them be astonished by that they say to somebody else, "Ooh, she did that well, you know." All right, and now we got to work on our waist. You have already marks practically with the seam that you have here, which is exactly the half. But now you got to mark again the middle of those two long pieces. So you would have exactly 4 pieces the same on all the way around, which you have to do. Because if you look at the measurements of the cuttings, you can see that my top part is actually all the way around approximately 40 centimeters longer than my skirt part. That means now that I marked both parts from the waist and divided into 4 even pieces, that means 40 centimeter more on each of those stretches. I got to ruffle in approximately 10 centimeters. You can look at my How to Ruffle Correctly video. Usually, the best way is to do 2 seams, pull then the thread in, and stitch right away between those 2. Look at my video and you will see this. But on this here, as 10 centimeters for that long stretch is really not much, I will only put 1 seam in and pull this. Again, on the upper thread, I have a slightly thicker thread. It's a 70 strength, and on the bottom I have a 120 strength, which means I will pull my upper thread very easily then. So I stitched back and forth in the beginning, and now I just do the first quarter of my marks. Here you see my mark coming. Right here I will stop, and I pull the thread out because I need that for pulling it in, for ruffle it. Now I continue again back and forward, and I stitch all the way to the end where my next mark is, which is the next side on the other side. Here again, I do not stitch over the seam because it might make it a little bit thick for pulling then. And again, I leave a thread hanging out. Here I go back and forward, do exactly the same. And the seam that I'm doing is about 9 or 10 millimeters wide, because later on I more or less stitch on top of that seam exactly. Again, 1/4 is finished here. You saw the mark. And you leave the thread hanging out. And here you hold it by stitching back and forth. And again, now here you go to where you started earlier on. And here you have to pull the thread out again for your ruffling. So that's my first preparation. Now I want to add the skirt onto this. Therefore, put the skirt inside the top, so you have both waists lying together. Look first of all where you want to start, if you want to start on the side or in the back middle. So look for your right pieces. As you know, the skirt from the front is slightly smaller, but you marked your sides, and here is my top, one of the sides, and that's where I will start. I will start on the side. So I put this seam directly on my mark that I have there. You see my contrast thread again. And first of all, just start by stitching a little bit back and forth, and I leave the needle inside the material because now the machine is more or less holding one side, one end. So I go to this thread that I had left over and look for my next mark that I have. And now you see that is my 10 centimeters that I have to ruffle in. So I take my upper thread, which is the thicker thread, as I said, and just carefully pull the material over that thread. You can push quite a bit in. The softer the material is, the better it will be. And in case I've forgotten to tell you, when you do this stitching for the ruffling, use your largest stitch on your sewing machine that you have. So now after you pulled a little bit in, you can look already, where are my marks? Will they come together? And then while the machine is holding one end and with the other hand, one end of the material, and you're holding the other end with the left hand, if you're right-handed like me, and now with my right hand, I even out the ruffle that it's more or less approximately all over, evenly divided and spread out. This can take some time. You must really only do a bit by bit, and now stitch exactly in your seam that you have here from your roughing it together. That means the skirt is lying on the bottom, and the top where you put this seam earlier on in, that is lying towards you, so you can see how much you want to ruffle, how much you want to even it out, and even to stitch exactly in that seam that you had before. Just do a little bit, then look underneath that you have no creases in anywhere. And this was my seam from my front skirt, which I just parted. And keep on looking for your end point, where you want to end, that you really have both marks then on top of each other. Do bit by bit. 1 centimeter edge seam again that I have here. Now you can see my two contrast stitches that I put in earlier on for my quartering the complete length. You can also hold the thread, your upper thread again, and push a little bit more in if you see that you're not completely correct. And there you can pull the first threads out, and the first quarter of the skirt you stitched already onto now. And now you do exactly the same with the next quarter. As soon as you reach that part there, keep your needle and the bottom in the material in, and again look for your next marks. Take your upper thread and pull the material over it into the widths that you need and that you want. You continue this way all the way along for all 4 quarters that we divided the skirt into, until you get all the way around. This particular job, of course, you do not need to do if you might say, okay, my skirt, the width is 1.60 meters by my cutting, so why don't I cut the top also only 1.60 meters, which means each piece would be 80 centimeters then you don't need to do this ruffling up. Then you have exactly the same length and would only need to stitch it all the way around once, which would make the job faster and easier, and material-wise 160 would also be all right. But I wanted to add this little job here anyway to show you that there's different possibilities, also what you can do So I repeat, if you cut the top the same width on the waist than your skirt, then you do not need to do this ruffle job. Then you only add the same lengths waists onto each other, top and skirt. And as we, after this particular job, continue with the shirring, then that would, almost be the same anyway. But just as a tip for you, depending on how much width you like to have in your top. And here you can see that's my last quarter that I got to do. That thread I can pull out already. That's not necessary anymore, as this part is stitched together already. And again I stitch exactly in the thread that I created there for my ruffing. Even it out a little bit. So I do have approximately the same widths everywhere. Of course, you can also, if this is too much for you in one go, you can, instead of making quarters onto the skirt, you can put more marks as in 8 parts as an example. Then it's even easier to divide the widths that you have to spread out evenly. As I said, this is my last one here, coming towards the end. And when I get there, first of all, I will clean off a little bit. As you could see, I had to pull the threads away each time. That's from pulling the material together, and I don't like this. I like to work tidy. So first of all, I go all the way around the skirt and look on the seam that I've just done, which kind of threads are hanging about. And I clean off. We say usually in industrial works, the clean off is being done at the end because they have special people for it. They do this so-called Endkontrolle, the last control. But it's much easier if you tidy in between already. So now you see the waist has been added, the top to the skirt. And now we have to start the shirring on this particular job. Therefore, I have to change my spool, the bobbin with the capsule. This particular spool, as if you watched my other video on shirring, I leave this capsule only for my normal thread. I never put the elastic shirring thread into it. I have an extra one, an extra capsule, and I use this one particularly only for doing shirring jobs. So I pull this elastic shirring thread to the top, pull it out a little bit because I need this for tying it later on. Now on which side you start doesn't matter, but of course we start on one of the side seams from the top, and I will stitch now approximately 1.5 centimeters above the seam that I have there. The seam itself is lying towards the bottom, which you can see slightly through my material through. If I want to stitch it closer than that, because of the width I got in it, I could maybe get some little pleats into it, which I don't want. That's why I will stitch this now 1.5 centimeters above my seam that you can see there. And I do not stitch back and forth because I need it for tying later on. So if you don't want any pleats into it, sometimes you just have to, with all the widths you have there, slightly turn this material around. Like you can see now, I'm pulling it practically the widths towards my left out of the way, and 1.5 centimeters above the other seam. And now I have to go all the way around till I get to the other side. If you do not want to put this shirring thread in the waist, You can just hold this together with a belt as well. That is up to you. But as I have this in the top, the shearing, I'd like to have it in the waist as well. And especially as you can put 4 or 5 or even more shearing threads into the waist. And now while I stitched a little bit already, you can see how this shearing is coming on already. But just continue and decide on your own if you want to do it like me in 1.5 centimeters above that seam. You can also go on 2 centimeters or 3. It is all up to you. There is no rules for this, how exactly to do it. So I'm almost the first time all the way around. Here you see my starting thread. And now you can stop your sewing there. But you can also continue. But therefore, first of all, I pull my upper thread towards the left side and put it a little bit out of the way because I do not want to stitch over this now with the next seam coming around. I stop about 1 stitch in front of that starting one. And now I decide, do I want to stitch the next shearing 1 centimeter or 1.5? That was 3 stitches. I do 4, which is approximately a good centimeter, which I went up now. And I just continue. So I'll let this one roll along. Now you have to pull a little bit more because of your first shearing in there already. It likes to pull back together. But that is no problem. It goes really easy. You just pull a little bit and let the machine then take the material in and go along in the width you want. And what's also quite nice on this, if somebody says, God, that's difficult, no, it's not. Believe me, it's this whole dress to do is more or less only straight seams. There is really no difficulty. And to my opinion, honestly, if you take your time, if you're a starter, and follow these instructions really step by step, you will find not only that you get really used to your sewing machine, because that's all. Sometimes people don't like to start doing anything for themselves sewing-wise because they can't even handle the machine yet. And by doing straight long seams, you exactly feel how you got to handle your machine and work with it. So on any job, any sewing you do, like let's say a cushion, it's straight seams. You can learn so perfectly onto anything like this. Now you see, I'm already around for the second time. And I do exactly the same here. I'm going 4 stitches up because that's what I did when I came around the first time. And here goes my 3rd seam already. I still got the same spool in because I filled it totally. And yes, I was lucky. You will see that now at the end. It just lasted exactly for my 4 seams that I will do here. I will decide on this later when the dress is finished, if I might add another seam above it or even 2 above it. That depends on how it looks and how I like it then. But that is so nice on this job, as there's no lining inside the dress. I can always get to this part. I can either pull one out if there's one too many in, or I add another 1 or 2 of the shearing seams, which gives it, each one gives it a different look again. So if you got a nice small waist, I think this will look really nice if you add even more than 4, which I'm doing here. Keep on going along until you reach the other side again. In case if your spool on a long seam like that with this elastic thread would be empty, then open it up a little bit that you have enough space for putting 2 or 3 nuts into it, and start with a new spool. That should also be no problem. Okay, no, don't forget not to stitch over that last stitch or the first stitch when you came around, because in case if you want to pull it a little bit tighter, it's better if that is not stitched over. which you can always do if your tensions on the machines, the upper tension and the tension from the capsule, from the spool, is very well set, then it is usually with a soft material that it pulls in approximately half of the length you have. So, which other words, if I have a soft material of 50 centimeter length and I do the shearing with it, I end up with about 25-30 centimeter length. But on this particular dress here, with all the widths I have, this might not be quite enough for me. And that's why if this is the case, I will, from the back, pull the rubber, the elastic thread, a little bit tighter and put some nuts into it. And this works just as well then. So this is my fourth stitch that I have here. And when that is done, I will first of all finish with this shearing job here in the waist. And as I said, you can add many more. Maybe take it out, the machine out, look at it and say, no, I put another one there. I think I'm going to like that. That will be just fine. So now I'm at the end and I pull this out. Whoops, I was right. Look at that. My lower elastic thread just lasted and I just got enough left to put a nut in. God, am I lucky. Doesn't happen every day, believe me. So that is what the shearing looks in the waist here now. And I'm at the moment satisfied with it until I tried it on to see if I have to pull it in a little bit more. So here we get already to do the top. We will start on one of the side seams, of course, again. And I put a new spool in already, an elastic thread spool. And now, as I don't want this width and the big ruffle to stand up under the arm, I make myself a little mark with a needle or with a thread, whatever, how you want to do it, on 10 centimeters from the side seam. And that I will do on both sides, of course, on both arms and on both sides from the middle, from the arm on. You will see this now, as we will start directly on the seam with our elastic shearing thread. And I will put right away a guide, a magnet guide that I have, on 2.5 centimeters on my machine, because that will be my ruffle that I have in the front and the back, as you've seen when I showed you the dress in the beginning. So first of all, I put this, the right side is facing me. I leave my threads hanging for nutting, putting the nuts in later. And I don't start there where my magnet is. I start on 1 centimeter width stitching. And before I get, and I don't stitch back and forth, I just start. Now I see there's my 10 centimeters. I pull this needle out and just pull the material over towards my guide, my magnet. And from here on, I got my 2.5 centimeter widths that I want for this nice look on the front and the back. So just let the machine take it in evenly, nicely. Go along, and before you get to your next side seam, you have to measure again your 10 centimeters. Of course, you can mark all this before you even start the sewing, but I show you how I do it. Here we go. Here's my seam. 10 centimeters from the seam. I put myself a little mark there. I'll go a little bit more straight on, and then I right away go sideways over, so I have only 1 centimeter under the arm there. I pull my thread out, leave enough hanging on each side, because I need that for pulling it in. And that was my first half of my top. I have to do the other half the same. So I continue first of all with my 10 centimeter, 1 centimeter width and 10 centimeter for under the arm. Go straight ahead, and before I get there, I want to pull it again on the 2.5 centimeter width and let my ironed over edge run along my magnet easily. The machine wants to do this all itself anyway. Holds it really nice. If it's ironed like that, you got no problem whatsoever. You can try this again on some little leftover material you have, how you could do something like that with sewing the curve for under the arm, and you will see it is really not so difficult, as long as you take your time and don't hesitate and believe in yourself, because anybody can do it, believe me. So almost coming towards the end here for my first all the way around. I don't even put this needle in. I held my finger there so I know that was my 10 centimeters. And before I stitch over the other stitch that's there already, I pull it out far enough and cut it off. So that's my first shirring for the top. Now I don't need the magnet anymore, my guide, because my guide is here. Now you can see that was the sleeve part, and there it goes over into the 2.5 centimeter standing over a raffle for the top. Now we're going to go all the way along 1 centimeter, or I go along all the way 1 centimeter, because that's the width that I chose for doing these next 3 shearings into it. Magnet goes away, not needed anymore. My thread is hanging out again for doing the nuts later on. And by my eye, I just go along 1 centimeter next to my just before stitched seam. For many machines you can buy some guides that you can add onto your presser foot, so it comes down from the top, and then you let your guide run in your other seam that you have. That is very helpful for if you don't have a good eyesight, or if you have a much wider seam that you want to do. That's very, very handsome. So that's the first half. Here we're again under the other side of the arm, and I do the same thing here. I pull my thread out as I need it for cutting, for putting the nuts in. Now make sure when you continue, as you have more and more threads hanging there now, put them on the side, push them away from underneath so you don't stitch over them, because then you have a problem. Either if you need to pull them, it's quite difficult and odd then. Make sure they're all not in your way when you do the stitching. All the way you go along, 1 centimeter. This is my second seam, and we have to do 2 more after this one. You can see there was again the arm part where I go smaller, and you can see more and more threads are hanging all over. And on the part underneath the arm, when you see or feel your seam that is underneath, maybe if your material seems a bit stiff, then don't stitch over the actual seam for your shearing. Leave those 2 centimeters off. That is no problem whatsoever, in case if that is not pulled together then later on. But when there is a seam, and as from this fold over there is already 2 materials, and with the seams that's 4 or even 6 materials or 8, depending on how many you got over there, then it's not easy to pull. Then your thread might rip. So stay away from those seams. If there's 2 stitches missing with the shearing, it doesn't matter. So 1 more time around, and we managed then. Again, put everything out of the way. We don't want that to interfere with anything. And again 1 centimeter. As I mentioned before, you do not have to do a 1 centimeter shearing. They can be wider apart or tighter. Maybe if it's a little dress for a girl, maybe I would only do a 8 millimeter seam there, because there isn't so much space in general anyway, and it might look cute on that girl to do it that way. Don't forget each time to really pull your threads out far enough. Now I gotta check my spool, which you should do in between as well, and I think that's a bit tight for a full seam. And I got one spool prepared or left over, which got a little bit more on, so I'm using that one because I know that will be enough to do one more complete seam here for me. And always pull your bottom thread up to the top. The machines always prefer that. And when you start stitching, your needle should be in the position to go down into the material when you start. Otherwise, if it's in the position to only just now going upwards, you will find that you suddenly think, oh, why did my machine unthread it then? I didn't do anything wrong. Well, it's because your thread lever, the big one on the front, pulled the thread up and out of the needle out while it was getting in position to stitch back into your material. And once again, I have to take one more left over. Yeah, well, I should have prepared more, which were totally full. But I also like to use up leftovers. I don't like to waste material. Yep, I should be almost at the end, hopefully. One other thing I like to mention, in case if you're really a starter and you think, oh, that's not so even, that's not so even. On this shearing jobs, even if you're not totally even with all your stitches, if there's a millimeter slipped out, you will not see it. Just do on a leftover piece, as I mentioned before, put 4, 5, 6 seams on a little piece next to each other, really by your eyesight. Then when you've done those 5 seams, take it out of the machine, let it crease together, and look at it. And you will see that it will look really good. You will not see it as you might be. So don't be so hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself too strictly strong. Okay, now you see my 4 shearings are finished here. And I can see already this should be pulled a little bit more together. John, keep the camera still. This is my 2.5 centimeter one. All together I had 6 centimeter left over. So you can see I nicely held with the last stitch also the end of my material there. Now, first of all, pull all the threads from the right side towards the left side. And either check first if you have to tighten them. If you do, then take the rubber, not the thread. Take the rubber and carefully pull the material along and pull it in. And you can change the widths by a lot if you do this bit by bit. You can try, if your material is really soft, to maybe take 2 of the elastic threads together and pull it right away in. That depends on the material and how your tension from the machine was on the threads. But you can also do 1 by 1, and you keep on going until you're satisfied with the result and the widths that you need for your top piece. This is a little bit of fiddly job, and as soon as you got them all exactly pulled to that width, then put nuts. 2 nuts will not be enough. Put at least 3 or 4 nuts and cut them off by leaving approximately 1 centimeter standing off your threads so they don't slip out. And here you see again, underneath my arm, we don't have this nice standing up material, only in the front and in the back. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this unbelievable long video, and maybe you like to make a dress like that yourself. I wish you so much success, and I'm looking forward to hear to see all your comments, and I really wish you much fun doing nice clothes for yourself. Thank you so much. See you again.